I've been doing a lot of talking about phone phreaking and telecommunication, and I really never explained how the system works. I mean, that's what phone phreaking is all about. It's about exploring and understanding the telephone system, not just ripping it off. So, let's get started on that. I mean, I've already explained, numbering plans, and I've explained, some of the basic technology, dialing plans and prefixes and suffixes and all that mumbo-jumbo, all that jazz. I've also showed you some really nice phreaking software that, lets you do some interesting things. Let's set the way back when machine to the 20s and the 30s, 1920s, 1930s. The telephone system comprised of pretty much a patchboard. A patchboard is just a board with a whole bunch of wires and jacks that are rewired on the fly by people. To place a call, you pick up your phone, you tap the headset a couple of times, and it blinked a little light right by your jack. So the operator would plug in her headset, and she'd ask you where you want it, what number you're dialing. You'd tell her, she'd call the other person, she'd ring it, and if they were there, she'd literally plug the two lines together. Now, if that's not a shit job, I don't know what is. I mean, sitting there waiting for lights to blink all day and, plugging cables in, boring as fuck. Not the pinnacle idea of efficiency. So, down the road, they figured, hey, let's make something a little bit better. Let's try to, electronics is coming down in price, and, it's becoming more available and things are becoming faster. Let's take our whack at an electronically controlled mechanical system, which was Crossbar. Crossbar was basically what it did was it's the first implementation of rotary or pulse dialing. Basically, when you pick up the phone nowadays, or even back then, when you pick up the phone, there are resistors inside that phone that equal or exceed 680 ohms. So what happens is the phone company can then detect that you've picked up the phone. So when the phone is off hook, or when you're in call, okay, on hook is not in use, off hook is in use. When it's off hook, the voltage is roughly 5 to 10 volts. Keeping in mind that the longer your string of copper, like the longer your copper wire is, the more resistance it's going to have. So if you have a wire that's 9, 10 miles long, of course it's going to have more resistance. So between 5 and 8 volts. When you put the phone on the hook and it's not in use, the voltage shoots up to about 48 volts. When the phone rings, it's roughly 90 to 110 volts. It's not enough to kill you. If you're working on your line, or someone else's, and a call comes in, it's not going to kill you, but you're going to know someone called. I mean, there were times where I'm splicing wires with my teeth and the phone rang and it shot my ass across the kitchen. Was it my kitchen? Either way. So, pulse dialing basically breaks the line in sequence. So if you want to dial 9, it breaks it 9 times. If you dial 3, it breaks it 3 times. Some of the first phone phreaks, what they did was they created zipper dial or zip dial, where basically, keeping in mind this is an all-mechanical system. I mean, granted the, talking and all that's electronic, the actual physical breaking the line was a mechanical system. What they did was they reworked the mechanics so it would dial faster, because rotary was slow as shit. It was horrible. If it was an emergency, forget about it. So what they did was they made it go faster, which was, the first form of phone phreaking. But, because it was a mechanically switched network, I mean, it was literally, instead of people, there were relays and arms that would shift and readjust. Creepy crawlies and critters would actually go inside the machinery and get ground up into paste, or, just because of, bad weather, humidity, or for whatever natural reasons or unnatural reasons, the equipment would fail physically. It would literally break down, just like a car would. And, the amount of time, like, replacing, fixing, and maintaining it just sucked. So, time goes on. We're in the 40s to 50s. Okay, now we're, like, in the 50s, between the 50s and 60s. We go, hey, electronics and the integrated circuit, transistors, ooh, fun, whoop-de-doo. So they said, let's take a whack at replacing this mechanical system with an electrical system. And basically what they did is they created a system that it count the pulses, but the equipment that would actually route the calls from exchange to exchange, it was relatively electronic. And this is where multi-frequency, or MF, comes in, and the days of the blue box, and the days of in-band signaling. When you have one exchange to another exchange, you have a system called a trunk. A trunk is just a link between those two systems. That trunk would constantly whistle a frequency of 2600 hertz. So it'd sit there, and when it's not in use, it's whistling. And when you pick up the phone and you'd rotary out your number, what the central office would do, or what the exchange would do, was communicate to that trunk using multi-frequency tones to control the trunk, and then the trunk would then connect to the exchange. Now, it might not always be one trunk. You could have multiple trunks, nut to butt, to go and place a call, which is like a tandem of trunks. So, what happened was, back in the day of the Blue Box, Captain Crunch, Joe and Grecia, all of those great people that all those movies and stories were written and told about, figured out ways of using an electronic device, or even whistling. Blind Joe and Grecia, a man who I'd love to shake his hand, he could whistle into the phone system, and he had perfect pitch. He'd be able to control the system just by whistling. I mean, that's awesome. That is hardcore right there. Just picking up the phone. In fact, I have some footage. I'll try to splice it in. I don't know how good it is, so forgive me if it sucks.
If you had perfect pitch like blind phone freak Joe and Grecia, you could whistle calls through the network.
Let's see if I make it this time. This is really hard to do. It sounded like all the tones were present, so the phone should be ringing about now. Okay, it hit the phone. It just takes a little while.
He even showed off his skills for the local media.
From his one phone to a town in Illinois and back to his other phone, a 1,000-mile phone call by whistling. Joe and Grecia says he used to do these things because he is fascinated by the technology.
Okay, so you have a blue box. A blue box is a device that's used to create the controlling tones of the trunks, the tandems, and the switching equipment. So the problem with this was when you're in a call, the computer system doesn't know the trunks, the tandems, the mainframes, the COs, the exchanges. They don't know that these tones are not coming from its own equipment. It doesn't realize it's coming from a user, and that allowed people to do whatever the hell they wanted. I mean, anything they wanted. And of course, with any kind of technology, there's always going to be some juvenile prick to abuse it. So nonetheless, the phone company kind of got, sick and tired of all these juvenile, phone freaks doing damage to their systems, shutting things down, setting things up, damned near like godlike things. They were doing some pretty cool stuff. So the phone company said, okay, we need to get control of this. What are we going to do? Technology's proved, this is the 70s-ish, kind of between the 70s and 80s. And ESS was born, Electronic Switching Systems. ESS was implemented in the late 70s, but it really didn't phase out until, like Crossbar and CCIT5, or CCIT, whatever version you've got, until about the late 80s. Basically, what happens now is when you pick up the phone, you have a dial tone in the same fashion of, resistors in the phone. Tell the office that you've picked up your phone. They apply a dial tone, and now you use DTMF, dual tone multi-frequency. And by now, if you're into phone freaking, you should understand what DTMF is. And the computer would decode the DTMF tones, and it would turn that DTMF into controllable actions. So, one area code number, prefix, suffix, all that jazz that I've previously explained comes into play now. However, this is the era of a digital technology, hence electronic switching system. Basically, when you pick up the phone and you talk into your phone, it sends your voice down a copper pair via analog audio, hits the mainframe, and gets turned into what we call PCM data, pulse control modulated data. PCM data is most commonly used today in CD audio. So using PCM data, it's now a digital data stream. Now, the same channel that your voice is in, it's the control channel and the voice channel are separate. So that basically means, you can't have a magic device that you play into the headset of a phone to control the equipment, because one, it's not analog, and two, you're not even on that same channel. So your voice data and your control data are going down separate lines. So even if you had some kind of magical device that would create audio waves that would translate, when once digitized into PCM data, would have the equivalent of the digital language, the digital packets of control data, it doesn't matter. It's not going down the right line. Now, one of the great things with ESS was everything's digital now, and I mean everything. You know, keeping in mind we're in the mid '80s by now, and the central offices and the mainframes were actually linked